So we will now proceed to the Q&A.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Professor Tess, Dr. Tess Sabada. And we now proceed to the Q&A. So you may actually raise your hands for you to be acknowledged. Otherwise, kindly type in your questions in the chat box. Um, and there are, of course, we've had a couple of presentations to this. We have three different insights on livelihoods. Two focusing on farmers and root crops, and then the other one in the fishery sector. And then we've had two, of course, reaction from our distinguished reactors who have joined us. So may we now invite questions in the Q&A box, or as I said, kindly raise your hands for this. Do you have any questions so far? So there's a question here that came in. This is from Christopher Galgo. His mic may be having issues, so I'll read his questions. No? With the disappointing developments from the COP26, it's really great to see these initiatives from the ground. How can we amplify these stories, initiatives, so that they can be translated into policies, or these can be adopted more systematically and sustainability? Okay, so anyone can may want to jump in and respond to this. So we call perhaps on Dr. Matua first because he did raise a point on the current climate negotiations, and then some of us will come in later. Sir? So the question is, how can we amplify these stories and initiatives?
Yes, thank you. I think we need to emphasize this and bring it also to the, if the global not yet accept this regionally, we need to raise this issue more specifically on our region, especially on the situation when the water raise, how many centimeter, the effect to the islands country like Indonesia, Philippines, and other, and also the issue of what's the consequences of the agenda of 1.5 that could 1.5 that could again become a panic situation of taking up the land from the community for peasant agriculture to become a food estate. And this is, we see the seed of this happen where when, especially when the pandemic hit the country, Indonesia, who are importing rice, for example, from the other country, especially from the midland China, midland, we are the local government responding by developing food estates, and this food estate might again taking the productive, what I said in the beginning, the productive asset of the women that will suffer from this. And the other issue is, it's not only for the agriculture productive land, but it also will become land grabbing to build a new forest to respond to 1.5 degree. I think this issue needs to be raised loudly by the organization, a lot of organization, also researchers. We in Indonesia, Samdana, we work with the Perempuan Aman. This is the indigenous people's wing of the women group who are really working on this, on what we call this next generation leader from below, trying to work on it, and also to find what we call the best solution. That's maybe, I think collaboration needs to be developed for that. Can't be alone.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Martua. I now request perhaps Ma'am Arma and Shirley, as well as Dr. Tulin. No, in your specific sectors that you work in, how do you think, can we raise those gender voices, in global platforms, given that we are most affected by climate risk. No, Ma'am Arma, would you like to start?
Okay. Yes, thank you, Jack, for that questions. So what we have been doing with the Farmer Business School. So as what our presenter, our reactor from Indonesia's mentioned about the mainstreaming of this approach, I think it's really important because our initiatives are on the based on the ground. What we need really is to encourage collaborations, partnership, and mainstreaming of this. That's why it's important to develop partnership with investment projects and government because they have the resources to fund and to reach to scale out these kinds of initiatives. So we really have to encourage collaborations and partnerships. And another thing about the climate resilience, we also focus on, as what Dr. Tulin has said, on root and tuber crops as a climate resilient crop, focusing and developing this into value adding these commodities so that it would increase, provide more income to the local communities and particularly to women.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Tulin, thank you very much, Ma'am Arma. Dr. Tulin, picking up on what Ma'am Arma has said, how do you think can higher learning institutions, give more attention to the plight of farmers in the context of decision making around climate change?
Okay. With root and tuber crops, we have already demonstrated how important this crop is in terms of climate change mitigation and livelihood programs. And we have also demonstrated to our partners, through our partners, how this work and how they can be profitable if the technologies will be adopted by our end users. So one of the things that we have talked about on how to make this or amplify this one or make this into a national agenda, for example, is really to transform or to translate all these findings into policy that would make root crops. Like, for example, okay, we have found that root crops could be another staple, okay? Or we have found that root crops could be, or sweet potato could be a good source of vitamins. It's a superfood. So a policy to really support this in the form of we should eat root crops once a day, for example, or we should incorporate that into our diet will probably help us make us aware that this is a very important crop. And in fact, this could be as a livelihood opportunity for our farmers. Or a policy that some agricultural lands that are really not fit for other crops can be planted with root crops, for example, because they can thrive under these conditions and they can also yield under these conditions. Of course, with some supplements like fertilizer amendments or organic fertilizer amendments, the more they can yield better, no? So all these things can be packaged into something that will make us all aware that these crops are there. They become resilient. They become they are the kind of, if you will, for lack of a better term, last resort when it comes to emergency staples. No, and I think that's we have proven that one, and I think many of our communities are actually also eat root crops during this time of emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tulin. Before I move on to Ma'am Shirley of Coastal Core and to Dr. Lau, there's a question here, Ma'am Arma. Perhaps you can respond to it. You've answered some of them, but if you would want to add, this comes from Mr. Lamberto Pilatan. How do farm business schools contribute to the development of gender responsive and climate smart approach and the strengthening of farming entrepreneurship for enhanced livelihood and resilience of women in the Philippines. Would you want
Yeah.
to add a few more points to what you said earlier?
Yes. Thank you to Sir Lamberto for this question. The approach itself, we have developed it to be to include to integrate the gender sensitivity, as I have mentioned. We even the development of the facilitators, and we are considering gender into it, equity, and also in the development of the business innovations, the commodities, the products that's being developed. There is a gender, we incorporate the gender criteria into it, and also in considering criteria that would consider climate smart approach. Like for example, in the businesses, we encourage the business groups to use environment friendly materials rather than using plastics. So these are some of the examples. And what's else the question? Sorry, I missed the question. It's moved already.
Yeah, no, it says,
Yeah.
what other, how else would you strengthen farming entrepreneurship for enhanced livelihood and resilience of
Yeah,
women in the Philippines?
yes, it's really developing these men and women farmers to engage in business, so to develop their small and micro enterprise. Small and micro enterprises, so that they would be linking to the markets. They graduate, they can only finish the farmer business school if they have actual business that they can develop. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ma'am Arma. Shirley, you're a practitioner, that for over 3 decades that have engaged with fishing communities and have innovated on approaches in terms of enabling better livelihoods for fisher folk. Going back to the earlier question that I also asked, how do you think can we give more attention? What needs to be done so that the government gives more attention to the plight of fishing communities, particularly to the plight of women in fishing households that are affected by climate change? Cheryl?
Yes, thank you. I am I am a believer now of the power of the stories. Um, uh, the same with what Mom Arma's sharing a while ago, that they've done hundreds of stories, collections of women, the narratives. It is one of the very powerful tool in trying to communicate the issues and the solutions that are being done on the ground, and that can be consolidated and can be part of policies of the national. In fact, we've started doing that since the development of the BRM law, and we have very limited participation then in the policy making for the climate act, climate change act, but still we continue to document and amplify these stories as evidences of people's adaptation and mitigation work that can be part of the Filipino what do you call this, contribution and policy transformation in the coming years or in the coming months. That's one way of creating that, apart from engaging directly in government programs, in government policy discussions in the local governments, from the province to the region. So that's what we're doing, and hopefully more evidence documentation will come out of these stories that we're sharing, and that can be eventually be a policy, hopefully by our country, in terms of people adaptation of these communities of the different sectors our of the Philippines in order for us to be to what do you call this, to solidify our policies for adaptation and mitigation, for example, in our various sectors, vulnerable sectors of our country.
Okay,
Yan
thank you
po.
very much, Shirley. I now go to Dr. Lau. Dr. Lau, you've been zeroing in earlier on the messaging. You know, the way the resource persons have tried to do their analysis of the different issues around gender roles. If you were to give a suggestion, because you know, several of our speakers said that it would be necessary to transform those stories from the ground, you know, into powerful messages that can be communicated to policymakers and decision makers. You know, how can you give some advice on how you think that is better done, and what particular areas of gender analysis should they give focus and attention on?
Very Miss Universe question. Thank you very much for that question. I will focus on one thing, which I think they all say in their papers, maybe not explicitly so, which is the problem of scale. I think there's a lot of success that has taken place at the local level, at the level of communities, where there are more willing, not just willing voices, no, but willing ears to listen. So the problem really is a problem of scale. And with the problem of scale comes the problem of policy. So how do we make this not just inclusive, but how can we make these changes, no, these potentially game-changing sort of interventions more larger in scope. And what we've noticed in our work with Dr. Porio, for example, is that a lot of times sectors really do operate in silos, and sometimes that's by design. So sometimes it's a limitation of government policy, for example, or sometimes it's a limitation of budget, even what you can spend things on, where specifically can you work. So these new tools, these new methodologies that were mentioned, and this sort of transdisciplinary thinking, I think, is what can be reinforced, what can be replicated, and what could hopefully be legislated later on. So we do look forward, for example, in the Philippines to what certain things like climate tagging can do for budgets, what the Bandanas ruling can do. So we're looking for the innovation now on the policy level in order to reintroduce a more transdisciplinary perspective when you look at climate and disaster resilience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lau. And before we wrap up this session, there's a message there for Ma'am Arma from Dr. Tulin. If it's okay that the VSU can adapt some of your FBS approaches, you know, in their work on livelihood opportunities for women in disaster-prone areas in Region 8. Would that be okay, Dr. Ma'am Arma? So you can communicate directly with
Yeah. Hi, ma'am.
Dr. Tulin.
Yeah, hi, Ma'am Annabelle. Yes, ma'am. Actually, you've been adapting this. Phil Rootcraft have adapted this with the project of Ma'am Julie. It's called the Community Micro Enterprise School. Yeah, under the Picard funded project po, ma'am. I think Chris is here. I think yeah. So he had you have already, ma'am. And ma'am, feel free, ma'am. We wanted this to be disseminated as much as possible because it really helps people on the ground. Thank you, Ma'am Annabelle.
Okay, and Dr. Gay Fiesta here encourages us to look beyond, you know, practical gender needs and to look at strategic gender needs. No? So